Mm, this is 12 drawings, given my personal share. So, in conclusion, something you'll hear is very good to hear is that the steps worked when I worked them. And when you hear someone say that, believe them. Because there are a lot of people working very hard to recover from a debilitating addiction, compulsion, drinking problem who die before they make it. That's just a sad fact. I almost was one of them. So the steps worked when I worked them. Now, without too much explanation, I'll just say once I had achieved some sobriety, I was really interested in holding on to it. I had struggled to understand the language that Bill Wilson used when he wrote the 12 steps and the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was really struggling, and I was really disappointed because I would read those words to someone else and I could just tell they weren't getting much out of hearing those words either. And I noticed one thing that Joe and Charlie did in the Big Book Comes Alive study was to actually examine the particular word that had been used in the literature to make a point. The best example, and I'm sorry if you've heard this before, but resent, in one point in step 4, you're supposed to write down the things that you resent. And long story short, they pulled the word apart into its Latin roots, which mean to feel again. At least according to Joe and Charlie, that's what the Latin roots of resent are. And when I went back to look at how I had done my 4-step inventory and how I'd written down the things I resent, I realized I had used my basically 21st century definitions for a word that he had written in 1936, 7, 8, 9. And so I really kind of got curious and I accidentally found Webster's dictionary that was written in that year, 1934 is when it was published, and that is the year that Bill Wilson got sober, and he proceeded to write the big book at some point, getting it published about 5 years later. So all of a sudden, I had a companion with a big book. I had this Webster's unabridged dictionary, big old honking large dictionary, but man, was a language in that dictionary precise. And when I looked back at the way Bill had been writing, I realized some of that language that I called old-fashioned and kind of dull actually was very precise language. He was very, I don't want to say educated like he had multiple degrees, but he went to private school in Vermont, which was very strict, old school type of instruction in the classroom, grammar, spelling, math, and all those good things. And then he went on to study law at Brooklyn Law School for 2 years. So he had been drilled and drilled and drilled and drilled on uh, writing, English grammar, and the use of correct words. So I now had a book that was actually bigger physically than the big book that unlocked so much of what was, quote, hiding in plain sight in the big book. There were so many insights. And that's why I ended up saying, I got to remember these. I've got to remember these. If I'm going to stay sober for the rest of my life, I've got to hang on to these insights. Because they say, addiction is a forgetting disease. And that's just a sad acknowledgement that people are desperate to find the truth, but it's almost as if their addiction will tear the truth away from them. And I didn't want that to happen. So being an illustrator, I picked up my pen and I began drawing what Webster's dictionary was for words that Bill Wilson had used in the 12-step writing. And it worked. I can just quickly and directly tell you, I have stayed sober since I made those drawings. 2007 is when I did my first one, and I've been sober ever since. And I only think it's because it forced me to hang on to the principles written in the original literature. So the drawings may not mean anything to you, but if you find something that helps you hang on to the meaning of the process you went through, then please do that. I think I can end it there. I appreciate you going through all this. I didn't mean to take up so many parts, but this is 12 Drawings. Please feel free to visit 12drawings.com. Thanks so much for listening.